My neighbor, who's the head of the HOA organization, absolutely hates my guts. I mean, she's been making my life miserable since the second I moved in. And then I figured out, oh, she hates me because of this. And then it makes me realize, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this. So I go to the other neighbors and ask around about her giving me all these tickets. They thought it was ridiculous. They've lived there for years and never got a ticket. So then I found out that this woman is mad that I moved into that house because she was trying to buy it. You know what? I'm gonna do something ridiculous. My neighbor hates me. Well, I'm actually really hoping that she doesn't hate me, and I've just been overthinking everything because that's not something that I'm unfamiliar with. But at this point, I'm pretty sure that she hates me for real. I'll let you decide. See, I moved into my late aunt's home a couple months ago. I grew up in the area and have always had plans to move back eventually. But that big, ambiguous eventually very quickly became right this moment now when she left me her house, fully paid for, in a very nice neighborhood just a few minutes drive away from where I grew up and where my sister lives. It was definitely a big change, but it's not one I was unprepared for in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I work from home. I'm closer to my family than I've been since college, and I've recently gotten into a woodworking, which is apparently very useful for home maintenance. The issue is actually a very simple one, and definitely not one that this website hasn't seen before. My aunt's home is part of a homeowners association. The head of the association is my next-door neighbor, Brenda, which obviously is a fake name. I'm not about to dox myself or my middle-aged neighbor over a petty drama that I'm not sure 100% certain I haven't overblown in my head. Okay, for your reference, I'll detail 3 incidents that have occurred since I moved in, and I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a comment telling me whether you think also Brenda despises me, or if I'm just overthinking this whole mess. I honestly don't know which response I would prefer. I mean, on one hand, the validation would be nice, but on the other, not being hated by my neighbor would be, well, pretty swell. Incident 1 is something I thought nothing of at the time, but in hindsight might be something seeing as the house was fully furnished and I'm a single man in my mid-20s. Moving day wasn't quite as dramatic as you would have expected. I parked my car, grabbed 3 suitcases I'd brought with me and walked into my new home. My sister had helped me with sorting through all of our aunt's stuff bit by bit before I got back into the States, so there wasn't even anything that had to be handled. I walked in, bags in hands, and I moved in. Quickly following this, I met my neighbor. I hadn't even managed to get my bags up the stairs when the doorbell rings. Now, I'm not a stranger to neighborly greetings. See, I was moving from a college town full of people who love nothing more than to be all up in each other's business. In the best way, I'd say. I loved my neighbors, so I was actually excited to meet some people here. I knew that the demographic skewed a little older, but hey, I'd never been the party animal type anywho. I could see myself getting invited to a weekend barbecue. Brenda did not want to invite me to a barbecue. Instead, she informed me that the visitors needed to have their visitor slip displayed on their dashboards when parking on the street. She must have checked my car the moment I shut the front door to already know that I had no such slip, but I digress. I let her know that, I wasn't a visitor, and that I just moved in today. Most people would have maybe apologized for the misunderstanding or laughed it off or even introduced themselves, but Brenda just said, "Oh," and stared at me for a while. Maybe it was rude of me, but the awkward silence was literally killing me at this point, so I kinda just nodded and bid her a good day and shut the door. Maybe I should have introduced myself like I expected her to do, or done anything other than shutting the door in her face, but I really just went blank in the moment, and so I'll accept the fact that I may not have made the best first impression. Incident 2 is when I learned her name. I didn't actually see Brenda for like 2 weeks after our first meeting, but I did get to meet a bunch of my other neighbors. See, my other next-door neighbor, Carla, and her husband, Dennis, also fake names, were lovely and had actually been relatively close to my aunt before she passed. They told me all about what it was like living next to her at all times, which, while as uneventful as most suburban neighborly relationships are, was pleasant enough. And they gave me the welcoming to the neighborhood lasagna, which was more than pleasant. My neighbor, from across the street tells me about her grandbabies, and the guy who lived next to her told me that he had pretty much every power tool imaginable in his garage, and to just give him a call if I ever needed anything after I mentioned getting into woodworking. I actually took him up on the offer and borrowed a couple of tools to fix my aunt's tragically tilted mailbox. Or should I say formally tilted mailbox, as I currently do not have a mailbox since Brenda decides to come over and inform me that not only was my drilling too loud for the first time of the day, 5 p.m. on a Saturday if it matters, but that I could not make home improvements that were visible from the street without approval of the HOA. Well, I just explained, no, I wasn't doing anything more than fixing the tilt. But she insisted that as the head of the HOA, she could not let me break the rules just because I was her neighbor. Somewhere in that mess of a conversation, I learned her name and figured out that she had already knew mine. At first, I assumed it was from talking to my late aunt, whom I'd always been very close to growing up, but I later found out from a tool guy that she's been asking around about me. To be fair to her, I also asked around about her after the incident. I didn't want to argue with my neighbor just 2 weeks after moving into the neighborhood, much less with the head of the HOA. But by the time she had come to tell me I could not work on the mailbox, I'd already removed it to realign the post it was set on. So I just really wanted to do all that stage and reattach the mailbox and get on with my life. I wasn't even changing it in any way. Hell, I hadn't even cleaned it. It hardly seemed like something to alert the HOA about. But she was adamant that rules are rules, and that she'd have to find me if I kept trying to work on it, and apparently that's something the HOA does. So I let it go. Incident 3 is also mailbox-centric. Obviously, after being told that I could not put my mailbox back up without approval of the HOA, I applied for the approval. It's an unnecessary, tedious process, but I thought, heck, I can do it. Then I received a notice that I'd improperly filled out the application. So I tried again, and this time being even more anal about the details, and again, I received a notice. Well, I tried a third time, and this time including every nitty-gritty detail of fastening a mailbox that I could think of. The plus side is that I did not receive a notice telling me that I'd done it wrong. The minus is that I received a different notice informing me that my request was pending approval, and it's been 6 weeks since then, and I remain mailboxless. Guys, the reason I've included this as an incident is because number 1, Brenda is the president of the association. Number 2, Tool Guy must have installed a new sprinkler system all by himself, which I know can't be something that he got approval for ages ago since I was the one who suggested that he does it last week. It could be nothing. In fact, it's most likely nothing, and I'm probably just reading into this too far. Into the few interactions I've had with her so far, and my people-pleasing side is just a little bit hurt that I'm not universally liked, I guess. But on the other hand, it could also be that my neighbor, the president of the HOA, despises me and is sabotaging my attempts to get a mailbox for some reason. Please help me figure this out. Update number 1. I return after about 3 weeks with an update. Kind of. I haven't actually seen Brenda since my last post, last week, but I've received a new fine from the HOA, so that's something. Work's been a little hectic, so I haven't actually done more than leave the house to pick up food. But the lovely HOA has found a problem with even that. In the weeks that I've been indoors, I've received notices for the following. Number 1, failure to uphold lawn maintenance. Number 2, improper disposal of waste, and number 3, untimely removal of waste receptacles. What? Translation, I haven't moved my lawn in about 2 weeks, which I hardly think is noticeable since my aunt has that kind of grass that doesn't really grow too high anywho. Secondly, I left some pizza boxes on top of the trash can after wheeling it to the curb instead of breaking it down and putting it in the box. And finally, I did not then roll side trash can back up from the curb each early enough a day, since I left it in until nearly noon the next day after trash collects. While all of these are definitely normal strikes for an HOA based on the, numerous threads that I've read that I've spent too much time on lately, getting 4 notices, 2 of which were about lawn maintenance for a lawn that honestly looks pretty good, and in the same week feels targeted, right? Surely no one else was getting 4 notices a week. So I did the simple thing. I asked around.
Yesterday, I mentioned the notices I've received in the last week to some of the other neighbors that I've gotten acquainted to. And, we shared a morning jog route with. They told me that 4 was definitely a little extreme and that they all hardly ever get notices. One didn't even know that the HOA gave out notices. I don't actually know what to do with this information, only that I'm pretty sure I want to do something. Seeing as I haven't met any other members of the association other than the president, I'm probably going to have to speak to Brenda about this at some point. The issue is, how am I going to broach the issue? However, new information has also come to light. Apparently, my niece, who lives only a 5-minute drive away from my sister, babysits for Brenda. Neve's going on 16 and has allegedly been looking after Brenda's twin daughter for nearly 6 months now. I only found out this because I was complaining to my sister about the whole lawn maintenance thing, and Neve happened to overhear me and mention the house next door. According to Neve, she barely ever crosses paths with Brenda, but she's totally down to investigate what her deal is. Obviously, I'm not going to be asking a 16-year-old niece of mine to investigate whether or not the president of the HOA has been targeting me with annoying notices. I'm an adult. I'll deal with this myself like any other adult would. My plan of action right now is to either speak to Brenda directly or to attend the HOA meetings if there's one soon to hopefully get a better grasp of the rules before baselessly accusing the president of abusing her power for some unknown reason. Well, we'll see how that goes. Update number 2. Hey again. So, guys, just so you know, it's been more than 2 weeks since I last posted, and the update is, my 16-year-old niece decided to investigate the president of the HOA without being asked to. And obviously, I never planned on asking my niece to do such a thing, since once again, I'm an adult, but here we are. Unfortunately, what she managed to find out is actually, relevant, and so many attempts to tell her off for her little Nancy Drew stunt might come across a little insincere. The gist of it is this, guys. Brenda, she hates me. Or more accurately, she hates the fact that I moved into my aunt's house. See, according to Neve, Brenda's children actually have an older brother. He's a little bit younger than me and mid-20-ish, and he moved out ages ago for college, and Brenda really wants him to move back home, but he doesn't want to, because number 1, he wants his own place. Number 2, what used to be his bedroom is now his little sister's bedroom. So enter my aunt's house. According to Brenda's 12-year-old daughters, the plan was to buy over the house from my aunt and have their older brother move in. His own place, his own bedroom, right next to Mother Dearest, a happy ending for all. Then I come around and foil her plan. I don't know if Brenda ever actually spoke to my aunt about buying the house, or if there were any agreements in place before she passed, but the house was left to me with no conflicting documents stating otherwise. So any agreement that they could have had would have been verbal at best. Well, I don't know. In any case, I hardly think it constitutes the slew of HOA notices I've been getting ever since I moved in. The cold shoulder I can deal with. Not every neighbor is going to want to be all buddy-buddy right off the bat. But the fact that no one else seems to be inundated with notices like I am makes me almost certain that she's doing this out of anger. So, I decide to go over and have a little chit-chat. To this point, it's been nearly 3 months since I moved in, and we still have not had a proper conversation. So I figured, well, I'll rectify this. Unfortunately, she wasn't home, but her husband was. Oh my gosh, he's worse. It was evident that he recognized me on the spot despite never having interacted before. I'd seen him coming in and going out of the house a couple of times, but with my work being pretty hectic, as it's been lately, I haven't really left all that much for him to be seeing me around. I figured his wife filled him in, though. He wasn't outright hostile, but he was kind of rude. The first thing he told me was that it was rude to come over to someone's house unannounced. Well, I conceded that, apologized, and mentioned that I just wanted to ask his wife a couple of questions about the neighborhood. He then informed me that she was not my secretary, and that I could figure things out myself or ask the HOA in an official capacity if I had any issues. I said I just wanted to have a chat with my neighbor. To watch, he responded that I had plenty of other neighbors to speak to and shut the door in my face. I mean, to be fair with him, I've done the same thing to his wife the day I moved in. Essentially, all this means that I haven't actually made any progress or learned anything other than what my 16-year-old part-time babysitter and part-time spy niece managed to get out of it. Of Brenda's children. I think I'll actually take her husband's advice, though. Maybe I should officially contact the HOA and ask them what the heck is going on. Update number 3. Hey guys. 2 things have happened since last week's updates. 1, my niece decided to play secret agent again, and 2, I've just had it with Brenda. Well, let's start with number 1. Neve came over yesterday and let me know that she was over at Brenda's to babysit again the night before. Despite the fact that both me and my sister, her mother even, have told her that she should not be involved with something like this, Neve's gotten it in her head that she's the only one who can fix this because she's my quote inside man. According to her, she's been waiting for night that Brenda gets home early to strike up a conversation about me and the house, and she says that the words of 2 to 12-year-olds don't exactly hold much weight. Apparently, Brenda's a huge workaholic who gets home really late most days, so it took a few days for them to cross paths, and Neve usually deals with her husband anyways. But when Brenda got home, Neve struck up a conversation about the, quote, old lady that lived next door. Apparently, she never mentioned that she was related to the neighbor, something about safety, I don't know, and so she wanted to lure Brenda into talking about me. And when she told me this, I figured that she had not gotten much of the conversation. Sure, Neve's charming, Neve's intelligent, and I know she's sociable enough to be well-liked at her school, but I didn't think that she would be able to get much out of a middle-aged neighbor. Come on. Oh, I was wrong. You know, Brenda, at the slightest prompting, went on a very big tirade about me. Apparently, I was disrespectful, ungrateful, and undeserving little brat who had stolen the home meant for her son right out of their nose, and I've been grandstanding in my newfound residence ever since. I was obnoxious, arrogant, and had no regard for lawn maintenance and needed to be taken down a peg. College kids like me would never know how to behave in a family environment, and she knew that if she did not nip any bad behavior in the bud now, I'd turn into a menace and terrorize the neighborhood for the rest of her life. Then the most damning thing she said, she hoped that I'd get sick of, quote, being held to a higher standard soon enough and move back to whichever hellhole I must have crawled from. Neve asked what she meant by that, to which Brenda responded that she's been making sure to crack down on any slight infraction to the C&Rs, which I've come to learn means covenants, rules, and regulations of the Homeowners Association, even if it's extremely minor, just to teach me a lesson. She said once I've had enough, I'd go packing and she'd finally be able to get the house like she'd planned back when my aunt still lived there. It's no secret that her health had been on the decline for a while. She wasn't sticking around for much longer, no matter how you look at it. And Brenda said, and I quote, I was just waiting for the old lady to finally kick the bucket, just so I could get the house. Pathetic. You would think that would be all that she had to say on the matter, but she went on. It's evident, well, it's been grating at her, that the rest of our neighbors have welcomed me warmly in contrast. She was particularly vexed by the reception I've received from my neighbors across the street, who loves talking about her grandchildren more than anything, and I've been more than happy to listen. Brenda had a lot of things to say about her, none of them being polite. The fact that she was speaking to the 16-year-old babysitter of her children did not seem to faze Brenda. Unfortunately for her, Neve recorded it. Neve recorded everything. So I now get to be privy to every little grievance that Brenda was having with each of our neighbors. Somehow the sweet lady across the street in particular, and while I still don't condone Neve's being involved, I'll say this. I'm done with silently dealing with the actions of my petty neighbor. We're adults. We're going to settle this like adults. Update number 4. In the 5 days since my last update, things have gone nuclear in an absurdly dramatic fashion. I'll pick up from where I left off. The day Neve showed me the recording of Brenda denouncing me and all of our neighbors, I decided that I had to speak to her once and for all. She was needlessly petty and childish about something that just did not work out for her. Anyone else would have just accepted the house was not up for sale and moved on. I wasn't interested in dealing with her husband again, so when she pulled up and got out of her vehicle while I was taking the trash out later that night, I decided that I'm going to speak to her right then and there. It went wrong spectacularly fast. Before I could get a word in beyond good evening, she informed me that unbroken down boxes on the curb were a violation. Yeah, no crap, Brenda. I haven't finished breaking them down when I came out to talk. I said I would handle it after we spoke, but she tells me that she would have to fine me for it how it was right then. I told her no, that's ridiculous, and that I knew that no one else on our streets got even half as many notices as I did. She tells me that she would be upping the fine because I was being argumentative. I argued. I said, yeah, this is ridiculous. The second time she upped the fine, this time for my hostile attitude. I knew what she had to be done. Clearly, speaking directly to her and trying to sort this out like adults was not going to work, and if she wanted to use the HOA, okay, I'll go through the HOA. Conveniently enough, 2 days ago there was a meeting. It's genuinely a quarterly thing, but they also wanted to plan a back-to-school barbecue, so they were going to be a special meeting. Everyone was welcome. I decided to attend. Maybe the way I did it was overly dramatic, but once everyone was seated, I asked if I could say a few words. Before Brenda could say anything, the neighbors around me welcomed me to speak, so I did. I mentioned the warm welcome I'd received since moving in from everyone other than Brenda. I then mentioned the slew of violation notices and fines I've received since moving in. I made sure to mention the ones that she had given me the other day for the boxes and the fact that I still have not even gotten my mailbox back. I explained that I tried to address the matter like an adult, but Brenda was more interested in talking about me behind my back than I presented the recording. See, I live in a one-party consent state for audio recordings, so when Brenda began to protest, I informed her as much, and I told her I wanted to accurately represent my side of the story. Well, evidently, my middle-aged suburban neighbors are nosy enough to have wanted to listen to the whole thing. Everything she said about wanting to bully me into moving out was damning enough for the president to abuse her power. But everyone really started paying attention when started talking about the rest of the neighbors, in particular, the sweet old lady across the street. Fun fact, I had not been aware of this before the meeting. The sweet old man across the street who loves his wife very much just so happens to be Brenda's boss. Apparently, he did not appreciate his wife being disparaged in such a descriptive fashion. When the recording ended, Brenda attempted to yell at me about recording her. Fortunately for me, our neighbors were not interested in anything that she had to say, and in just a few short minutes, Brenda was stripped of her position of president, told not to come into work on Monday, and shunned out of the room by all of my lovely neighbors. I'm still reeling from everything that happened there. I've since been assured by other members of the HOA that they would be getting all my violations and fines overturned and that I could expect to not be receiving any more for made-up minor infractions. My niece is now convinced that she's, a super spy, though she's taken a bit of a pay bump since she decided to drop Brenda as a client, which just adds to the list of things that Brenda has lost by being unnecessarily petty. I'm just hoping that now that this is settled, that everything calms down, I just want to live my life. Guys, thanks for reading along. If you have, thank you for the support. I hope you too get to defeat any evil HOA presidents that may plague you.